Hello everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and we're going to talk about the Batman yet again and take a quick look at the first wave of reviews and reactions to the movie. Now, the review embargo lifted recently on Monday the 28th of February, shortly after initial screenings, to allow critics to view the film and give their overall reactions. Now, as we all know, there's been an unrelenting hype and expectation on this movie, largely from social media, if I'm going to be honest, and I've seen so many people anoint this film to be the greatest Batman film ever, a truly masterpiece, better than The Dark Knight, better than Burton's 1989 movie. And all of these assumptions were being made with such vigour and conviction many months before the release, with many making statements, I suspect, without having actually seen all of the live action Batman films or indeed Batman the Animated Series. Now, when I read reviews, I try not to let them dictate my overall enthusiasm for a movie itself. Now, I'll be seeing the film of the Batman on Friday, so I'll provide my own thoughts, so keep an eye on those within the channel very shortly. But I always try to keep a balanced perspective when going into any film, regardless of my enthusiasm or not regarding the trailers or the overall plot synopsis. So I try not to let myself be led too much by what people are saying online. And I'm also very skeptical whenever I hear very much more speculative statements. So in particularly when we see around this movie, the greatest of all time and a true masterpiece. Now, the fact is, whenever it's a film that we deem a certain masterpiece, so for example, let's say The Godfather or Scarface or the Lord of the Rings films like those, they earn their right to be a masterpiece over a certain amount of years. There'll be many times that you'll have certain films that aren't deemed that great to begin with, and then over the time they start to get more traction, much more recognition in the long run. So a prime example of this is Blade Runner. Now, even though I don't believe that film is a masterpiece, there are many people that do deem it a masterpiece, but on its initial release it wasn't well received at the time. But we'll take a look at some of the reactions, a lot of which I've seen on social media. Now, to give some context, I truly understand that this is Batman. He still is regarded, alongside Spider-Man, as the most popular superhero amongst current culture. He definitely is the most popular DC character, even though I still deem Superman to be the greatest DC character of all time. So I fully understand the huge wave of excitement whenever we get another Batman film, especially when it's deemed very dark and serious, as brooding as what we've certainly been indicating towards when regarding this overall film. So when we look at the overall reactions online, and I look at the Rolling Stone, which states that this is a far more, very much moodier and more enraged, slicker, darker Knight, returning the character very much to his pulpy roots. Okay, again, I think we've also always had that in some way, shape or form throughout previous Batman movies. I looked at a particular discussing film that states that this is an unmissable spectacle that manages to surpass all expectations and give us an iconic new Dark Knight. So again, fair enough, if that's what they say, that's what they believe. Again, I'm very skeptical, especially in terms of an iconic new Dark Knight, as if the previous versions weren't iconic enough. I struggle to feel as if this version could ever be as iconic as Michael Keaton from the 1989 and 1992 Batman Returns, but again, we'll wait and see. When you talk about the likes of iconic, again, that is something that is tested over time. So I don't think we can state this as a new or something that's truly iconic until maybe 3 years, 4 years, 5 years after its release. So we have another reaction here from Comic Book Resources that states that the Batman is an impressive love letter to the DC vigilante that truthfully explores what vengeance really means. So again, we can interpret that in many different ways in terms of the vengeance aspect, because I don't believe Batman, the role of his character is to truly take vengeance. In many iterations, he discovers already the killer of his parents even before he becomes Batman, and it's really the role of Batman is to make sure that nobody else goes through what he experienced through a child. So if we're talking vengeance, it's probably more towards the actual city of Gotham rather than the vengeance of what happened between him and his parents. So we have another reaction here from comicbookmovie.com. The Batman is one of the most captivating, relentless and unforgettable comic book movies ever. Fair enough, okay. Again, context, there's so many comic book movies now, so unless you've seen a lot of the DC comic book movies and of course all of the Marvel movies, as well as the Fox X-Men and the Logan film as well. Now, despite the overwhelmingly positive reviews, and there has been an overwhelming positive reaction to this, I think currently on Rotten Tomatoes at the time that I'm making this video, which is Monday the 28th of February, it currently stands at a 91% on the Rotten Tomatoes score. Now, of course, Just because something has a high score on Rotten Tomatoes doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be great, and this is all subjective overall. But at the moment, a lot of people being hyped about this film, but it's not absolute in many ways. I've seen a lot of reviews that have had quite a different take on the film. There have been certain criticisms indeed of the lackluster third act, and I think that was something that many people have pointed out throughout. Again, I think the concern that the film is 3 hours long, especially if the third act is very lackluster. If you're going to have a 3-hour movie, you want the third act to be the best part of the film, not the worst part of the film. So that was one of my overall concerns when covering this movie, that I thought that 3 hours could be too long in terms of telling the overall story. There have been some other criticisms that have alluded to Pattinson's interpretation not really having that much in terms of range or personality. He's very much too emo, very one note, too brooding, and again, that's another big concern of mine, because again, this is a character that's meant to carry the story, carry the narrative, and if there's no flexibility in terms of his character, he's not going to be a truly compelling character to watch. Now, one of the reviews I really did like was from Scott Mendelson from Forbes, where he talked about how the movie covered a lot of the same territory that we saw in previous iterations, and he made comparisons particularly to The Dark Knight from 2008, Christopher Nolan's. Now, prior to this movie, that was the Batman film in modern day times that was seen as the ultimate cinematic masterpiece, and I can vividly remember when that came out, we were getting the same speculative statements about that film than what we were getting now with this movie overall. But Scott Mendelson very much talked about how this movie doesn't really offer anything more that we haven't really seen in previous iterations. Much like The Dark Knight, he felt that it was too long. We have another review that I watched on YouTube, but that was by David Chen, who said that the movie was really a bit of a mess. There are many other reviews stating that the film is overall a bit boring, despite the great cinematography and the sound and editing. And I think overall, nobody has really criticised the actors' performances or the direction. I think from looking at all of the trailers, we could all agree that we expected all of the production levels to be of an extremely high standard, and you could certainly see that as well from all of the TV spots as well. So I don't think, or I haven't seen much criticism in terms of the cinematography, and to be honest, even if somebody doesn't like this film, it's looking like you won't really get a lot of negative criticisms in terms of how the film looks. But from everything that I'm reading so far, I think it's primarily the third act that has let a lot of people down. Some people have stated that the murder mystery angle, as we all know, is going to be very much the central focus of the film, really doesn't go anywhere in the last third act as well. So again, that's something that's concerning me a lot, because I don't want this to be a movie that really goes nowhere. Now, it's recently been compared also to the likes of Seven and Zodiac. Those are two very much more of your serial killer narratives that we saw in the mid-90s. And I think Zodiac came about in the early 2000s, correct me if I'm wrong, in the comics. Now, Seven was a great movie, but for me, Zodiac was very overrated. That again was around 2.5 hours long. And I think it had as well a very lackluster conclusion that didn't really go anywhere. And I found that movie very unsatisfying. So if it's going to be in the range between those movies, I hopefully that it will be much more in the direction of Seven rather than Zodiac. Of course, we're not going to expect it to have the same kind of graphic, violent tone of what we saw in Seven, but I just hope it's got much more of that compelling story about it. So really overall, in terms of these reactions, it's been largely overwhelmingly positive, but there are a few that are far more critical and nuanced, and I really like those reviews overall, because again, as I mentioned before, whenever I see anything that's hyperbolic or sensationalistic, it kind of puts you off, because I think sometimes people are coming from a perspective that they really want this film to be great. I understand there are a lot of very hardcore Batman fans out there, and they want Batman to be the greatest no matter what capacity, whether it's a series or whether it's a movie overall. Batman has to have his place at the top of the comic book hierarchy culturally, so I understand all of that. And I genuinely hope this movie is good. I genuinely hope to enjoy it when I see it. I don't think anybody wants to go and watch a particularly bad film, but it's just where I'm just overly skeptical when I hear all of those speculative statements. And it's the greatest of all time, because that's such a big statement to make, particularly when you consider we've had so many previous Batman films. And I think for the most part, if you take out Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, say, and of course Batman vs Superman, I think most of the Batman films have been pretty good to great. Overall, my favourites have still been the perhaps Tim Burton movies, and I'll probably expand a lot more in terms of what I believe are the best Batman films. Once I've seen this film, I will do a breakdown within the channel when I count down which are the best Batman live action films overall. And as well, we have to also consider the animated series from 1992, which perhaps may be the overall best iteration of Batman overall in terms of live action or animated form. Certainly that animated series is pretty tough to beat. That had the right style of real distinctiveness, that real noir narrative about it, along with great action, and it didn't deconstruct Batman. So I think that's probably the best handling of the character overall. But those really were the main reactions that I saw online. I have watched a lot of YouTube reviewers and reactions. It seems at the time very positive, with a few critics. Now, as we go on further, prior to the premiere on the 4th of March this year, we may, I think, probably see a bit more criticism in terms of the movie itself, and I think it will have a big box office weekend, but it may struggle or may have a steep decline in its second weekend overall, and it's probably down to the series tone and the runtime as well. But those are my quick overall thoughts and feelings on some of the coverage and the earlier reactions and review to the Batman. Let me know what you think in the comments below. As I mentioned before, I will provide both a non-spoiler and spoiler review of the movie when I go to see the movie on Friday. I'll try to watch it as early as possible, so look out for Friday afternoon, Friday evening on the 4th of March 2022 for my non-spoiler review, and then I will put up my spoiler review shortly after that. That'll probably come out Saturday evening as well. So let me know what you think about all of this hype and reviews, first early wave of reactions to the Batman, in the comments, and if you have any overall hopes and concerns regarding the movie, let me know in the comments below. Please also hit and like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.